Hey y'all, welcome back to the Church Street Podcast. This is the podcast here at First Grapevine Methodist Church, and we are grateful and honored to get to be here with you, no matter where you find yourself today. And as you listen, what you're going to hear today is one of our subcategories that we call the Bullpen, where we are going to recap the sermon series that we just finished, and we're also going to introduce the new one that I can say we're both excited about. It's going to be
absolutely
a lot of fun. So my name is Zach Stiefel. I'm one of the pastors here, and we've got Dr. Keva Green, one of the other pastors here, and off screen we've got Paul Beals, our production manager, making sure that we sound good, we look good, and that this gets posted to where it needs to get posted. Paul, we're grateful for you and the ministry that you do as well. But today we're going to talk about how we just wrapped up our series on the book of Jonah, and that was in concordance with and step with our stewardship campaign. And we're also going to be talking about this new sermon series that we're going to start called High Theology. And really what this emphasizes is some of those lessons that we learned from the kids' table. So, Keva, as you wrapped up Jonah, how are you feeling about it? What were your thoughts?
It was a fun sermon series. I mean, Jonah is one of those fascinating books. People quickly know Jonah and the whale, but then they may not know all the story. And we actually had this title, Jonah, a faithful servant, but it was more kind of tongue-in-cheek because Jonah wasn't necessarily the faithful servant, but there are so many lessons that we could learn from Jonah's life. Sometimes you learn more lessons from the things that go wrong rather than the things that go right.
Yeah, how often do you see what to do by seeing what not to do?
That's right. So he was a good model for what not to do, like don't run from God, or you may find yourself in the belly of a fish.
Don't challenge the pagan sailors. They'll throw you in the water.
Yeah, that's right. But, so it was good. And each week we took a different chapter, and that book is laid out extremely well as far as it's actually one of those that kind of matches back and forth of a story, a prayer, a story, part prayer. And it was interesting to see how everything kind of worked together.
Yeah, and one thing I love about Jonah is the language of it is so well curated.
It is.
It's you can see the intention behind just about every word, and the fact that translates into English is even better. I think that we see the way that nowhere else in the Bible are you going to see things like God hurled a storm at the sea, or God spoke to the great fish and it vomited Jonah onto the dry land. These are very intentionally placed words that I think just bring you in to Jonah. And as we wrapped up this past week, I love to point out that as a church, we read every single verse together. And so it is a prayer of ours for sure that we are a Bible reading church and that we're spending time in the Bible, and what a gift it was to get to do just that, to read the Bible together. And of course we read the Bible every week, and we are always going to as we're preaching, but just it was very fun to be in one specific spot and to go through a full book as a church body.
Well, and I found it interesting. I had a couple people tell me they thought they knew what the book was all about, because they just had that high-level view of it. And then as we really started going through it, and they were reading along with us and everything, then it was kind of like, oh, there are a lot of lessons that I can learn from this, and it's not exactly what I originally thought. Yeah,
and it's interesting with Jonah. Of course, when this was originally written, it didn't have chapter and verse.
Right.
But the way that those are set up even is it feels like each one could have its own conclusion. Chapter 1, we saw Jonah run away from God, flee toward Tarshish, have this big storm thrown at them, have the mariners, the sailors, trying to figure out what it is, them make these vows and these sacrifices to God once they really learn who God is. But the chapter ends with, and then God appointed a fish and it swallowed up Jonah. That could be it. Then we get to chapter 2 and we see Jonah's prayer from the belly of the whale. Really, that could be it. That it ends with, after the end of this prayer, it ends with, and the fish vomited Jonah onto the dry land. So that could be it. You could tie a bow there. Chapter 3, same thing. You saw this feel good, happy ending, only for chapter 4 to start with but. Yeah. And I love the way you pointed this out really well in your sermon this week, I thought, of the fact that it ends with a question mark.
Yeah.
When you read that, what does that say to you? How does that challenge you that it ends with a question?
Well, that just tells me there's still more to come.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be an answer to that question. But interestingly, it's God asking the question. And so he's actually asking Jonah, did I not have the right to, show compassion to the Ninevites? But he's also asking us, are we willing to recognize that God has compassion to show somebody that we might not like, that God's for all people.
Yeah, so. It's amazing. And somebody pointed out this out to me just this morning, actually, that there are 2 books that end in a question mark. Jonah and Nahum.
Yeah.
Both of those are centered around ministry to the Ninevites. That's pretty amazing, I think. I had never put those pieces together before, so that was a bulb-breaking moment for me, a glass-shattering time. But just amazing, the way that God is using something like that as a challenge, because that question mark was, again, intentional and curated for a reason and placed where it was with intention.
Yeah.
And when we go through Jonah, we see the what not to do's. How does that translate into our stewardship here and now?
Well, Jonah was running from God. He didn't want to be faithful to what God was clearly calling him to. And I think that's true for us too. When we look at the things God's calling us to, are we faithful to them? Our vows, when we join a Methodist church, we make a vow to be faithful with our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness. And so that's not pick and choose which one you'd like. That is all of those. And so it's choosing to honor God by doing what God's asked us to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was one thing about the story of Jonah. It was interesting because it's a satire, and God's prophet, the one that you would think would be faithful, is not faithful. But then you see the pagan sailors, and they make vows and sacrifices, and they're trying to be faithful. And even the Ninevites, the moment they hear, the news that they needed to hear, they began fasting and putting on sackcloth and turning back to God. And yet,
and
Jonah
even
was
doing so with their livestock, with their food.
Yeah, yeah, with all that. And so, but yet Jonah's the one that's not getting in line. So it's just a reminder, I think for all of us, especially with the vows that we've made to God, we need to be faithful and know that that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, but I do love the part about the animals getting thrown in different places. So
yeah, it's kind of hysterical when you read it, like, oh, even the cows have to repent with you.
That's right. Put on sackcloth and
yeah. It was a really fun series, I thought. If you could pick, and this is putting you on the spot a little bit, if you could pick one highlight from this series for you, what would it have been?
I guess probably the third chapter, when he goes into Nineveh, and the preaching of a 8-word sermon, which is what we would all want, if we could make our sermons 8 words long and for people to immediately repent and turn to the Lord, and they'd get out of church a lot earlier if they'd do that. So.
Yeah, we'd beat up some other churches to lunch that way, for sure.
That's right. So what about you? What was your favorite part?
I think across all of our services, we saw some really cool things happen this month. And we saw 2 new members join, one in the traditional, one in the contemporary. And we got to do a couple baptisms in the contemporary service. And that was really meaningful. And I thought it tied in perfect to Jonah chapter 3. That was the week that it was the baptisms took place, that his 8-word sermon is 40 days more and Nineveh will be overthrown. 40 days more, Nineveh will be overthrown.
And
thank you. Yeah,
yes,
it's
that's
added
there.
in there.
Yeah,
it
is only 5 words by Hebrew, but
Yeah.
we're not speaking Hebrew.
Right. Yeah. I would feel very bad for the podcast listeners if we were speaking Hebrew for them.
Yeah.
But it was pretty special because the 2 individuals that got baptized were a 22-year-old, and then based on his witness, his 11-year-old brother had the courage to make that decision too. He'd been thinking it, he'd been wanting to do it, but didn't know how. And then it was that type of commitment that helped him take the plunge as well. So I would say that for me.
How powerful is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
and I will throw in that the person that joined, I guess it was after the first Jonah sermon, not that it was necessarily that, but had been visiting our church a few times and so forth, was headed out the door and meant to say it was a good service, and instead the words that came out were, "I'd like to join the church." And she looked just as surprised, and then later told me that wasn't what I planned to say, but I guess it was God's words. And so
that's amazing.
So, by the third Jonah story,
Yeah.
then she joined, and she will be a wonderful asset to our church. And just such a blessing. So
I love that. God is doing some incredible things.
He is.
And now we're going to look at our next sermon series. Yeah. As we all know, we're entering into the month of November, and that oftentimes will mean, of course, Thanksgiving, but time with family that can be good or it can be difficult. It's a time where we are called to take an inventory and an audit on what it is that we're grateful for. I think for many people, it can be a hard month.
Yeah.
One, if you're walking through a season of grief, holidays are always going to be hard. When you have to see those people that maybe you haven't spoken to since last Thanksgiving, that's not the easiest place to be. And yet it's still a time that we're called to be thankful. And so I'm really excited about this new sermon series that like I said, we're calling it High Theology, and our subline there is Lessons from the Kids' Table. Because if we think back to those days when we were just children, the lessons that you learn are vital to who you will become. And, I'm in that stage of life I'm teaching a lot of that right now, of how to play nice and how to share and how to forgive and how to say grace or to pray over a meal, those kinds of things. And these are lessons that I think are great to be reminded of. What are you looking forward to most when you think of this sermon series?
Oh, I just think there's a lot of opportunities to just kind of remind us of those things that somehow we may have forgotten. We did learn them when we were young of those type of things, especially like play nice, and share your toys and stuff. But to be able to put it more on a level of, okay, most of us are adults.
Yeah.
We don't always act like adults, but we are adults, and those same rules apply to us, and life goes better. And especially when we are thinking about the family getting together, often that's where a lot of the pain is from those family problems. It may have been something tiny years ago, but yet grudges have grown. And hopefully if we can kind of go back and say, if you can let go of some of these things, if you can forgive, if you can play nice or be kind and make a little extra effort, if you can make a difference in your family's life, it kind of goes on out beyond that to our community and our nation and our world, if we can spread that kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're starting this week, which will be November 2nd.
Right.
And that is the theme that day is play nice.
Correct.
And as I've been thinking about it, again, I'm in this stage of life of teaching some of this stuff, and so it's kind of at the forefront, but I'm thinking of my little girl playing soccer. And so often, when you're at home, when you're at school, when you're wherever you are, if you're at church, it is be sure to share. Be sure to give this person a turn. Be sure that you're being kind. And then you get onto something like a soccer field and you're like, steal the ball, get it, get past all those people.
Knock her down.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been a really funny lesson because we know the play nice piece and we know that's what we're supposed to do. But then when we get outside of our own space, our own comfort zone, then it's do what you got to do to get ahead. Steal the ball from that person. All of these kinds of things. And already this series is kind of starting to rub me a little bit, which I think is a good thing. Hopefully that means the Holy Spirit's talking. But
well, does this stuff apply when you're driving on the highway too? You have to play nice and you have to share the lane. And oh, okay.
Yeah, we both come the same direction. I had to take a big exit today to get around a lot of traffic, and that's not always fun.
I know. Those people should play nice and get out of our way, right?
That's right.
Because after all, it's all about us, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe not.
And I also want to mention that on November 2nd, in the evening, we're going to have our All Saints service.
Yes.
And this is a day for any of those who have lost somebody, whether it be this year or whenever.
Yeah.
It's a time for us to come and to remember and to honor those people, and we'll light candles, and it's a very meaningful time. So if you find yourself in that place, and maybe you're walking through a season of grief, we would love to have you at 6 p.m. that night in our sanctuary, and we will both be preaching together and being a part of this service. And it's a meaningful one to me, and we're confident that it would be for you as well.
Yeah. Should be a powerful service, so yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have music from our contemporary worship leader, Gary Edwards, and also our choir director, Rebecca Kraft, together, which I've been kind of yearning for the day when we can get their two voices together, because individually they're beautiful, but put them together, it's going to be powerful.
Yeah, that'll be great.
It's going to be a really good service. I pray that it will be a meaningful one. And again, we would love to see you there if you find yourself in that place. But that kind of takes us through this next series. Any lasting thoughts on it before we jump into it?
Just praying that God will guide us through all this, and those lessons that we're teaching are lessons that will help us all as we move towards Thanksgiving and then towards getting closer to Advent. But in everything that we do, whether it was the lessons that we learned from Jonah or the lessons from High Theology, we want to make sure that we're constantly listening to God and living our lives in a way that honors Him. Yeah,
absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And when we think back on some of those lessons that we learned, even as children, if you really boil it down, what an opportunity that is to shine God's light. When you do share, when you forgive, when you say grace. And it can impact people in more ways than we know.
Yeah.
But you'll have to come to hear more about it. We'll see you on a Sunday morning. You can also catch us online, whether that be YouTube or Facebook. But please know, for those of you listening, we are grateful for you and grateful for this time together. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to it continuing. We hope you have a good week.